Gawin Gayabi Gwynawin Nishine. This means no more stolen sisters in the Ojibwe language. The Ojibwe language is sacred to me as I have ties to this tribe. It is my familial tribe, and I am the daughter of a registered Native American from the Ojibwe tribe. No More Stolen Sisters is the mantra of the organization MMIW. MMIW was founded in 2006 to raise awareness for the violence and the inequality that Indigenous women face in society. The grounds for this organization can be found and traced all the way back to over 500 years ago, to the pre-colonization and the colonization eras. According to an article on IC on colonialism, genocide, and gender violence, an estimated 12 million Indigenous people's lives were lost from the time the first ship landed on the East Coast to the last settlement in the West. Rape also ran rampant in the Indigenous communities alongside murder, and this was because of misrepresentation. Even simple companies such as Ivory Soap advertised their product as by misrepresenting Native Americans and portraying them as bloody savages, murderous, godless fiends. According to the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native American Women, even sex trafficking was prevalent back then, especially prevalent back then. The prime example of this would be Pocahontas, whose true name was Motueka. She was 11 years old when John Smith set foot on American soil, and that is where the inspiration for the Disney film Pocahontas came from. However, the untold story is that shortly thereafter she went missing and was never found. Pocahontas, Motueka, was the first missing and murdered Indigenous girl. Another example of the inequality that Native Americans faced is residential schools. The first residential school opened its doors in 1831, and Indigenous kids were forced to go there by the government. According to the International Human Rights of American Minorities, an estimated 50,000 lives were lost due to residential schools. It was common for young girls to go home pregnant, raped by the government officials and their voices going unheard. They would live the rest of their lives in disgrace. Murder was also common. To this day, there are still unmarked graves of children's bodies being found on the lands of residential schools, where the children had been murdered, covered up, and their families lied to. Another example of isolation for the Native Americans by the government are reservations. Due to disproportionate funding and not enough outreach, alcoholism, violence, drugs, lack of proper health care, and lack of proper education run rampant through the reservations. Reservations are a result of treaties. Around 500 treaties were made between the Indigenous people and the U.S. government, and to this day, there is not a single treaty left standing that was not violated or broken in some way. Though things such as genocide and residential schools are not prevalent in our society today, modern statistics will still show you the disproportionate violence and abuse that Indigenous people face. According to the CDC, homicide, murder, is the third leading cause of death for Indigenous women ages 1 to 19. According to the National Institute of Justice, 97% of violence visited upon Indigenous women is visited upon by an interracial perpetrator, meaning a perpetrator of a different race, whereas only 35% of them will face violence from an intraracial perpetrator, meaning a perpetrator that is also Indigenous. According to the National Institute of Justice as well, violence on American Indian or Alaskan Native women of any kind, including sexual violence, stalking, and physical and psychological aggression by an intimate partner, will be faced at a higher percentage than that of non-Hispanic and white women. For instance, 48.8% of Native American women will experience being stalked at one point in their life, as opposed to 26.8% of white women, with a total of 84.3% of Native American women facing any violence in their lifetime. Another common thing for Native American people of any gender to face is police brutality. Native American people are more likely to be killed by police officers than any other minority. According to the Department of Justice database, in 2016, 5,712 cases of missing or murdered Indigenous people, girls specifically, were reported. and a grand total of 116 of them were ever properly reported and listed in the database. 4 out of 5 Native American women will be affected by violence of any kind in their lifetime, racial violence. And Native American women alone face murder rates 10 times higher than the national average. MMIW stands to create impact. They bring impact with their symbolism and their change. MMIW is represented through artwork and meaning, such as the red handprint over the mouth, the red dress, and even just little things that people wear or make to raise awareness. They also make their voices prevalent in their communities through marches, petitions, and other memorializations and the like. The purpose behind MMIW is to make sure that women and girls who faced violence or were killed because they were Indigenous are remembered, to make sure that someone remembers and someone cares and someone fights for their justice. The ultimate goal behind MMIW is to bring change, to make the lives of Indigenous people safer, and to give them the equality they never had since the colonization era. In conclusion, MMIW fights injustice. It strives to make the world a better place and hopes that one day it can. I hope you found this speech enlightening. Thank you for your time.